Hi guys, good morning. Welcome to another episode of Clangin and Bangin with Mikey, episode 238. And today we're gonna talk about, man, a whole bunch of shit's been popping off, right? Um this past Tuesday we had a tsunami warning in effect. Thankfully nothing happened. But here's the kicker: it took people like myself 3 hours. Some people took them 4 hours to get home because when they told everybody to leave work, they let everybody go at the same time. And it took us an hour. Damn, that's some good coffee. It took us an hour to get out of our parking structure onto the main drag. And then once we got onto the main drag, it took me like 45 minutes to drive a block and a half. But yeah, so it was just a lot of things that went wrong. That went wrong. That should have had more planning. And thankfully the tsunami did not hit because the amount of people on the road then was still quite a bit. But today we're gonna talk about self-confidence and self-esteem, man. I was told yesterday by somebody who I grew up with. She's like, and she's now my dentist, right? That's how long I've known this girl. She's like 4 or 5 years older than me. Anyway, so we was having a conversation yesterday during my checkup, and she's asking a bunch of questions, and she said like, yeah, X, Y, and Z, yada yada yada. Like you was always confident, even when you was a kid. And I was like, yeah. And before you guys jump on me and X, Y, and Z, no, she's married, she has kids. I don't do that shit, right? Like, and it was interesting too because when she said that, I had to think about that. I'm like, yeah, I was always confident, you know. I'm not, and that was a different type of confidence back then, and so I think, that's important because when you're dealing with somebody who's not confident, who doesn't have the self-esteem, like after a while, it wears on you, you know. It wears you down a bit because it's not that they're a bad person, not that they're, that they don't deserve love and everything, because they do, but it's not your job to constantly pour into somebody like that, right? And I think that's where a lot of people get it messed up at. They think, well, if I keep giving and giving and giving, it's going to turn around. And I was like, majority of the time it doesn't. Majority of the time all it does is leaves a lot of people angry, upset, burnt out, disassociated, distant. And a lot of the times when you bring it to that person and when you say like, hey, look, your lack of self-confidence and self-esteem is draining, they want to take it as an attack. And it's really not, because it's like that's you setting a boundary for it, for yourself. It's like everybody wants to talk about boundaries and all this other shit. It's like boundaries isn't for the other person. Boundaries is for you. And whatever it is, whether it's a situationship, a relationship. I hope it's not a situationship, because if it's like that, then you're wasting your time with that individual. I've read too many fucking sub articles on Reddit where people talking about situationships and everything else, and I'm like, yo, if you're confused, that means they ain't choosing you. It's interesting to me too. Is like when people get mad, like like how you don't pick up the phone or X, Y, and Z, and I'm like, you understand that we're not together, right? You understand all that, right? And I think when you break it down to people like that who have low self-esteem and low confidence or low self-confidence, it's like I said, they take it as an attack because they're like, yeah, boom, 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 boom. It's like, no, it's like, it's not an attack. It's me telling you what your behavior is. It's the constant reassurance, and reassurance is the constant, like like having self-doubt, or like letting your fears get the best of you. I'm not saying that we don't all have fear and we don't all have doubt, because we do. Like if a motherfucker tells you that, oh, I don't fear anything, I don't have any doubts, they're lying to you, straight up. I told somebody once, it's like, that's a flat out lie. And you know it's a lie, you know? And I think that's like, with me, it's like, I'm always going to be truthful with people. I'm not going to sit here, you know, and like, bullshit them or try to get one over on them, because like, I'm not that dude. It's like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh yeah, X, Y, and Z, all this other shit. Because to me, it's like, whether if I'm sleeping with you or whether we friends or whatever it is, because there's clearly a boundary with that, right? I'm not that dude who sleeps with his female friends. I'm not that dude who entertains multiple girls at the same time, even though I've been accused of doing that shit. Like, people have accused me of doing X, Y, and Z, and I'm like, no, these are just people that I know. I just happen to be talking to them and talking to you at the same time. Like, I'm not trying to sleep with every girl that I talk to, you know? To me, that's stupid. That's how you catch an STI. I'm not saying that some of you girls are dirty. I'm just saying, you know, use discernment. But that's what it boils down to, bro. It's like, if people don't have the self-esteem and the self-confidence, no matter what you do, it's not gonna work. Like, you can sit there and counsel them and do X, Y, and Z. Like, my dad, career military, never had the best relationship with the man. You know, he's been dead almost, 12 years? Yeah. No, 13 years. So he's been dead almost 13 years, and it's like, he would always say, like, hey man, sometimes, you know, he's talking about his military experience. He's like, you can sit there, you can counsel people, but like, sometimes you gotta move on, you know? And sometimes you gotta realize, no matter how much you want good for them, is like, they don't want it for themselves. And I didn't understand that then, because I was so young. But now it's, you know, now in my mid-30s, I'm like, that makes sense. Like, why would you constantly stick around in a situation where you know your message is not being received, or when you know your message is being taken as an attack? Because if you're gonna be with me, bro, you're gonna grow with me, you know? Like, I'm not gonna do no mediocre bullshit. I'm not gonna, like, oh yeah, well, that's fucked up. It's like, no, yeah, it is fucked up, you know? It's horrible, but at the same time, it's your fault. And what I mean by that is, like, a lot of people will stay in situations where they've worn out their welcome. It's like, you're not adding to my life. You're actually a hindrance to it, and it's like, you gotta go, you know. And one of my homegirls told me something. She's like, yeah, you know what? If somebody's not choosing you, you know, like, you gotta leave the situation. I'm like, yo, sis, you're right. But did you ever stop and look at your situation? Which brings me to people who are married and or going through a divorce. I think people get divorced because they know deep down inside that they married the wrong person. They know deep down inside that, like, it just wasn't gonna work out. That gut intuition never lies, right? Hell, I knew somebody who was with somebody for 10 years, and as soon as they got married, like 6 months later, they got divorced. And the guy was telling me, he was like, yeah, man, he's like, I knew I made a mistake, you know, but he was having a bunch of health issues and all this other stuff popped up, and he was like, and like his boyfriend at the time, he couldn't make any decisions on his health and whatnot too, just in case something does happen, because in the eyes of the health system, if you're not married, you have no say over this other person, right? And that's why they got married, and that's why it's like all this shit popped off between them. And I'm like, yeah. And he was like, yeah. He's like, bro, he's like, I knew deep down inside I was making a mistake. I just didn't want to accept it, you know? And I think that's the most important thing. Knowing that it's always good to listen to your gut until your gut intuition, you know, and And lastly, man, if somebody tells you that, it wasn't the real deal, that they caved to make you happy, believe them. As shitty as it may be, believe them. Because honestly, it's not your fault that that they caved. It's not your fault that they compromised. It's not it's not your fault that they did X, Y, and Z, because nobody forced them to stay in the situation, right? Nobody forced them to do X, Y, and Z. And I think that's where a lot of people get it fucked up at. They're like, well, I did X, Y, and Z for you. Like, nobody asked you to, though. That's the thing. Nobody asked you to do that. Nobody asked you to compromise anything. Nobody asked you, to do X, Y, and Z. And it's true. Like, literally, nobody asked you to do that, but you went ahead and did it. But, like, you're blaming the other person, right? And that's my thing, too. It's like, once you tell that to somebody, and you try to shift blame on, from you to them, and I'm like, it doesn't work that way. Like, I'm sorry, but in what reality does that work? It doesn't work. So with that being said, man, it's like, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because of what I'm going through. Like, I can look at things a little differently. I was never walking around with puppy dog eyes or anything like that, because I wasn't. It's like I was looking at shit for what it was, not for what I wanted it to be. But I do think one thing, man, is like a lot of people, they're afraid. They're afraid for whatever reason. They're afraid because X, Y, and Z, and it's like, I look at that and be like, yo, if you're afraid, that's fine. But don't sit there and pretend like you got it together. Don't sit there and pretend like this shit don't bother you. Don't sit there and pretend like, X, Y, and Z. It's like, I remember once this one girl that I know, she's like, I can't believe I dated a bum and nobody told me anything. And I'm like, no, people told you leave him the fuck alone 20 plus years ago. They didn't fucking listen to him. And now look at you. You're 40. So it was like, at the same time, it's like, how can you sit there and say that shit? Again, it comes down to no accountability. Because anybody who had accountability would know that they fucked up. It's like this one girl that I used to know. She was dating this dude, off and on, and he was I could just tell the guy was a slime ball. Like this how he carried himself. Like, that's the definition of a nigga. It's like, and what I mean by that is like, the dude was a scammer. It's like, he just gave off the body language, this aura that just didn't sit right with me, right? And come to find out, he was scamming people in the gym that I work out at. And I looked at that and I thought, like, you gave this nigga not once, not twice, but three chances, and he still fucked up. Like, where's your self accountability? And if everybody's coming to you and they telling you the exact same story at different times, it's like, you start looking around like, I think there might be some validity to this shit. And come to find out, basically, long story short, is like, what they were saying was true. Like, the dude was doing X, Y, and Z, and I just looked at that like, okay, you can do whatever you want to do, but you're not free from the consequences of your actions. And the one thing about me is like, I'm not gonna sit here and sugarcoat shit for you. My name is not Willy Wonka. I don't play sides. I don't pick judgments or whatever it is, because, like, yo, I don't understand your situation, but I'll sit there and listen to it for a few times. It's like, but after a while, it's like, I began to realize like, yo, I'm enabling this behavior, right? Long story. The last thing I'm gonna say about self confidence and self esteem, right? And the ability to go get shit done. I've talked about this person before, but I'm gonna talk about this person again because it's relevant to the conversation. I had a former friend of mine. She would always complain about her job, always. And when she had the opportunity to get, a whole brand new career, start fresh, do whatever, do it, do what she wanted to do, right? It was a two-part test. This is for a police department. It's a physical and it's a it's a written and it's a physical. My bad. So you do the written first and then you go back for the physical. So she did the written, passed the written, whatever, did the thing, and I was like, okay, cool, congratulations, because she's letting me know. I was like, okay, I was like, oh, so when's the physical part of it? And she's like, oh, come like a month. I was like, okay, cool. Month goes by, and so I hit her up a couple of days later. I was like, hey, how did your physical go? And she's like, well, I didn't make it. What you mean? I guess she got stuck in traffic or whatever. You had to be there by a certain time, before the check, at the facility, to check in. I was like, okay, whatever. Traffic accidents, like shit like that, you can't really control, right? Because you can't, And so she signs back up, and she's telling me all this stuff. And I said, okay, cool. Whatever. So I text her like, hey, how did the written go? Thinking, because like they tell you right then and there if you passed or not, right? Like that's how fast it is. Or at least they did. I don't know how they do it now. But anyway, so all this stuff was going on. So she texted me. She's like, oh, I didn't make it. Like, what you mean? And then she basically just blew it off, and I'm like, you blew it off, but you spent all this time complaining about how you don't like your job, and then she come up with excuse after excuse after excuse to justify her not chasing her goals and her dreams, and I'm like, no, I'm sorry. Like, that bullshit is not gonna work here. She was like, what? I was like, yeah. It was like you spent all this time complaining just to not do anything. That's pathetic. And I can't rock with that. Like, I can't be friends with somebody who just doesn't want to get it together. I can't be friends with somebody who just doesn't know that they're the cause of their own storm in their own season. I've never seen somebody complain about this shit and do nothing to fix it at all. At all. And that's the part of me that just doesn't make any sense. It's like, I don't understand how people can bitch about their situations and do nothing to want to fix it. And the consequence for that is like, we stopped being friends. There was other shit involved too, but I couldn't be around somebody who just didn't want to take control of their own life. And one of my favorite bodybuilders, the reason why I got into competitive bodybuilding was Kai Green. And I used to watch his treadmill confessions, part 1 and part 2, when I used to compete, on a loop, and he would always say, like, look, it's nobody's job to come save you. You got to save yourself, no matter what it is. And it's true. A lot of people will sit there and be like, oh, I came from this situation, that situation. All right, I understand that, and that's unfortunate. And it sucks. But what's that got to do with what you got going on now? What's that got to do with X, Y, and Z? It has nothing to do with that, right? And it goes back to self-esteem and self-confidence. It's like, if you lack both, then it doesn't matter. Like, you have to build it up. And going back to what my dentist told me, like when she said, like, you've always been confident ever since you was a little kid. I had to think about that. I'm like, yeah, I have been. And I owe that to my dad, man. It's like, as much as we didn't have the best relationship, as much as he was verbally and physically abusive, emotionally abusive, it's like, the one thing he did teach me is how to stand on my own 2 feet. You know, he taught me to be confident. He taught me to have self-esteem. And he was like, I remember once when I was like 18, 19 years old, he's like, you use your disability as a crutch, and you think that's gonna help you, and all it's gonna do is hurt you. And like my dad, like people think I'm brash and fucking mean. Like, no, that nigga was something else. He's like, he's the type of dude, like, he was honest to a fault, and he would rub people the wrong way because of it. But I'm like no, it's like he's looking at the situation and he's seeing the bullshit that you're trying to pull. And I'm the same way to a point. I can be, empathetic, not sympathetic though. I can be empathetic to your situation. Okay, yeah, that sucks. Okay, yeah, you going through a divorce. Okay, yeah, boom, 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 boom. But somewhere along the lines, it's like you had to know that you made the mistake. You had to know that, that the person that you was, getting married to, having kids with, and this is in no shot, and no from away a shot to anybody in particular, because it's not, because people do this shit every day, like they, and women and men, I once had a guy that I knew, he said like, oh yeah, well, if we have a baby, she gonna change. No, bro. No, all you doing is creating a lifelong problem with somebody that's not worth it. And it's like, and it goes back to that. It's like, if you don't have the self-esteem and the self-confidence to walk away from a situation, because walking away from a situation is even more difficult than staying in it. Because at the same time, you're like, but if I walk away from it, I'm gonna lose all the work that I did. No, you're not. If you walk away from a situation that doesn't serve you, you're gonna regain yourself. And you have to sit with yourself, and you have to understand that your emotions and feelings, while you're in the situation, they're valid to you. And you have to be able to take the lessons and the trauma and everything else and all the bad shit that comes with it, and you have to learn from it. Heartbreak sucks. Having shit end sucks. But at the same time, you know what's even more shitty? Staying in a situation where you know you're not valued, where you know you're not valued, and you know you're not appreciated, you know you're not seen, you know you're not heard. And lastly, you're not respected. Because if you're not valued, if you're not appreciated, you're not seen, you're not heard, how the fuck can somebody respect you? Make that make sense, man. Too many people stay in situations where they know that, what's already been aforementioned is happening to them, but because they lack the self-esteem and the self-confidence to choose themselves. Because, see, the thing is, and this is my last point, a lot of people are takers. And some people are givers, but the difference between that is, like, givers will stay in a situation because the taker, because they want that taker, to always see them from the beginning, right? Be the dude, or be the girl from the beginning. But you know what? That's a farce. That was a ruse. Of course they didn't want you. Of course they don't want you to leave, because that's, you're their supply. Takers have no limits, and givers have no limits either. So be careful out there, man. Always check yourself. And if you have problems with self-esteem and self-confidence, go fix that. It's a skill that you have to cultivate. I didn't wake up one day and be like, oh, I'm this guy, I'm that guy. No. I was taught that. And in the process of being taught that, I taught myself too that I'm important. I don't mind walking away from a situation and realizing that, okay, this may not serve me, but you know what? I gotta serve myself. All right, y'all, this is about 25 minutes of your life that you won't get back. Hope you're keeping it full peace. private player, positive pushing. I'll see y'all next week. I love y'all. And like I always say, know your worth because you're better than what you are. All right, y'all. Peace.